Hey YouTube, welcome back to Locked In Anglers. Today we're going to give a good breakdown of our top 5 baits in the springtime for largemouth. I mean, it's a great time to go largemouth fishing in the spring. I think it's one of the best times to go largemouth fish. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, totally. There's a lot of fish to be had. Those big ones. It's just that time of year where you can trick them into biting something and running into maybe even the best fish that you'll catch all year. So it's an exciting time, and so we just want to take you guys along, show you kind of the top 5 baits that we have that just a ton of confidence in. We've won a ton of money on these baits early in the season each year, and just thought we'd share kind of some of the juice that we've really been kind of holding a bit tight to the vest over the last handful of years.
I mean, how many times have we gone small fishing all day in the spring and then we bust out the spinnerbait or crankbait just to catch our one big largemouth at the end of the day, you know?
Exactly.
So my top 5 baits, first off I'm going to start with my power fishing stuff. My first bait is actually going to be a 1/2 ounce Johnson spinnerbait. And I'll throw this thing to really start covering water. I mean, I love this thing. This is really how I kind of find the areas. And then I'll also start power fishing with a 3/8 ounce, sometimes 1/2 ounce chatterbait. I mean, you can just skip these underdocks. You can really cover water fast with these 2 baits. And then another bait I like throwing, I mean, if the fish are starting to feel a little finicky or whatnot, you know, might need not as much flash as these 2, you know, not as much movement. I'll throw a 1/4 ounce swim jig. I love these things. I mean, I've caught a lot of big fish on a swim jig.
And but for trailers, are you throwing mostly swim baits, or what are you kind of targeting?
So my trailers are actually normally on a spinnerbait. I'm most likely going to do a trash fish, which is just kind of a bigger swim bait. Sometimes I'll cut that head off just so I get a little bit extra flare in that skirt. That's what I'll throw on my spinnerbait. So, and then I'll also throw this bait on my swim jigs together. And then when I go and throw my chatterbaits and whatnot, I actually like throwing a Zoom Fluke. The Zoom Fluke actually just has great action with these baits. It's incredible. I mean, I've ran all sorts of different trailers, and literally, the Zoom Fluke is like proven.
Yeah, it's
best.
great. It doesn't interfere with the blades cadence, and it rocks with the bait. Yeah, no,
it really just works well together. I mean, when you throw swim baits on there, it kind of just defeats like the whole skirt movement sometimes, you know. So that's why I just go with this straight and narrow Zoom Fluke, and it just works, you know.
I totally agree. I mean, I'm going to throw this. I'm still going to be throwing the spinnerbait and the chatterbait as well. But the one thing, if I can get away with it, I'm going to go straight to the Lure Jensen speed trap. This thing, whether you're targeting kind of the craw early, or kind of going with the more natural craw to bluegill presentation, this thing lets you cover a ton of water really quickly, and it just gets bites. Something about that flat-sided crankbait with the tighter wobble in that colder water, it just works really well.
Heck yeah, it does.
Also, the LV 500. Whether I'm fishing it in that kind of 12 to 18 foot range on the like targeting deeper grass lines, or if I'm hopping it like a jig, just working on deep rock or around wood. It's just a hard way. It's hard for me to put those down. They're baits that let you cover a lot of water, and really elicit that reaction strike, which is how you're going to mostly catch a lot of your big fish.
Now, do you ever throw those LVs in like some of the grass, like the early grass coming up and whatnot? Is that kind of a...
So, yeah, no, that's a great question. And it really depends for me based on the type of body, or like the type of water. So if it's like a lowland reservoir that usually is known for like big flats and grass, or a river, you bet. I'm right up in the grass. I'm burning that as fast as I can over it, just trying to tick the tops of the grass. But if it's in kind of more of your highland reservoirs, your natural lakes that have a lot of rock, that's when I'll typically go to more of the hopping it like a jig, or just really slowly creeping it above the grass in like that 12 to 18 feet range. Yeah. And then, of course, me too, I love a swim jig. Swim jigs are my absolute favorite way to catch them. That and swim baits, and this is basically just a skirted swim bait, so I have to throw it. But I tend to go with a really natural color. I just like our bluegill perch combinations. I always pair it with anywhere between a 3 3/4 and 4/8 Kitech or Rage Swimmer, just kind of based on how I'm seeing the fish react. But yeah, definitely a little more natural than your White swim jig. What's the story there?
So so a lot of people say you don't gotta throw a white swim jig. That looks weird. I'm like, it works. But so I actually like throwing the white swim jig because it has a lot more drawing power. It's something that they're going to see from farther away. Something they're going to get more interested. Yeah, everybody's going to throw this. How many people are going to throw white? You know, white's just a lot more bold and a lot more drawing power, I believe. That's why I like throwing some of those brighter colors. I mean, that's why my spinnerbait's a whitish color. It's actually a rainbow trout color Johnson, and the white swim jig. I like throwing those brighter colors just because, like I've been saying, that drawing power. I really think that really helps out bringing the fish.
So you'll throw that even if we're not on the shad body of water.
Oh, I'll throw that everywhere.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, I've seen it work. There's been days where he's absolutely made me the net guy with that, and I can't explain it because white doesn't match any of the forage profile, but it works. So I mean, I'll lick my wounds on that one because that's I've definitely had my eyes open to that one. But yeah, so basically I think the name of the game is what we're seeing is we're starting power fishing every time.
Definitely.
Like there's a handful of spawning areas on every lake, but finding where the fish are grouped up it's really important to cover water and really get those areas before we dial them in.
Definitely. And like, so when we go find the fish power fishing, right? Say we go out and we start smashing them on the power fishing, right? Okay, yeah, we caught all those fish in that cove or that staging area, right? But there's always going to be more fish, right? And this kind of really helps locate where they are in those coves or staging areas or docks or wherever, you know? So then we can come back in with some slower presentations. Like, I love coming back in with a flipping jig. This is a jig that I tie. It's a 3/8 ounce jig with a whole bunch of rubber on it. Tell you the truth, this thing falls that fast. As fast as a Cinco. It's insane.
So slow.
And you can see my trailer doesn't do anything. It's just a 420 beaver. But this is how I usually try and produce some of my bigger bites, and that's how I really kind of break down after I find the fish after the power fishing.
Okay, that makes sense. And so when you throw on that big swim bait then?
When I really find them. When I really want that bigger bite and I need that bigger bite, but like I know where they're staging from all the other stuff that I'm doing, when I know where they're staged at, I will go throw this big bait just to get that one bite. Because I mean, a lot of times in the early season, you just need that one big bite to push you over the top. So that's why, like, say you're throwing something else, something different bait, I'll throw this, try and get that one bite. I mean, we've both seen it.
No, that makes sense. And I mean, to echo that, once we found them, there's a handful of different techniques that we typically employ. These are some of our sneakier ones. Some of the ones that we always have that 6-inch Senko tied on, especially this time of year. The fish are lethargic. You kind of find maybe they're under a handful of docks or off the edge of some weed lines. Coming in after you fished it power fishing and just lobbing the big 6-inch Senko under there or skipping it under a dock is a really good way to trigger that fish that might not be in the most active mood.
I don't know how many times you've made me the net guy from you just throwing out there, and it's just like, I'll hold this net.
Yeah, it's a no-nonsense bait. You throw that on there, and you just watch your line, and you just stare at your line sitting on the surface, and the second it takes off, it's game time. But then there is one it's a pretty sneaky one. Most people think it's a little too early, but
Definitely.
We have had some crazy days on a frog. I think the earliest I've caught a frogfish about 47 degrees. It's a great presentation, and honestly we got onto it very similar, or just by kind of approaching it like we did the jig, or the slow falling jig, or the Senko. Is like these fish are in 3-4 feet of water, and sometimes the only way they'll eat is they'll feed up on a bait that's falling really slowly. So why would they not go up that extra foot to get that frog that was skipped under a dock and it's just sitting on the surface completely natural? It's pretty key for us to really fish it slowly. So we'll skip it up under a dock, let all the ripples go away, and just slowly walk that bait back to us. But I mean, there's been a ton of tournaments that have been won where the big fish, 8, 9, 10 pounders, have come on a frog, and you're talking pre-spawn. 48 to 51 degree water temp, and it's a bait that nobody's throwing. And I mean, for me, the key is like we're always looking at baits that have kind of that orangey yellow sort of belly this time of year, just for the same reason that they're targeting red. it's a color that it just has a large triggering effect this time of year. And, something about sticking a frogfish at the beginning of March, early February, that's a good way to get you jonesing for frog fishing for the rest of the year, I'll tell you that.
Now, I got a question for you, because this is something that I've always thought helps out with my jig, because I love skipping jigs, right? And one thing why I think skipping jigs is better than just flipping a jig, because I think that this jig skipping over the top is going to draw that fish out like, oh, what's coming over my head?
Yeah.
So I think that's like something that that's why I skip it every time. Even if it's just an easy flip I can do, I will always skip it to that spot.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not going under something.
No, I totally agree. I do the same thing with when I'm throwing a swim jig. I think that, I think there's a little bit of drawing power to that skip, and it's also it's usually a much quieter presentation when it finally enters the water, and so you either draw curiosity or you just don't spook the fish with the big loud splash. So there's it's some middle ground in there that definitely plays a lot more, especially when they're not as they're just not as aggressive yet. They're hungry and they want to eat big profiles, but they're not going to chase a bait 100 yards this time of year. So that makes sense. That's why it's one. I mean, I think of all the tournaments, that's put the most big ones in the boat on tournament day in the last 4 or 5 years. It's been the jig.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, sometimes it's the way to go, but some days I'll actually, when it's super early, I will cast this jig, the spinnerbait. I'll cast all these baits on the bank.
Yeah.
Just so I have no splash. It's all silent coming in.
Yep.
I mean,
no, that's a great point. Yeah, it's the sneakiest possible presentation when there's literally no splash.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. But yeah, so these are kind of the ones that, I mean, these are our workhorses in the spring. You'll never not see these on our deck. We've won too much money on them. We've caught too many fish on them early in the year for us not to have them tied on just about every time. But yeah, no, let us know in the comments, like, what are your favorite baits in the spring? Did we miss something? Especially for those largemouth. If there's something out there that we're not talking about, let us know. Maybe we need to start doing it.
Yeah, maybe.
But yeah, no, really, really appreciate you guys following us along with this. And be sure to check out the next video when we break down our top 5 smallmouth baits as well. Have a good one, guys.
Tight lines.